Well, thanks everybody for signing on to our roundtable discussion. I don't have a real formal agenda for us here today, but just understanding that we've been talking at you for about 6 webinars now, we wanted to give you all the opportunity to talk back and ask any questions that we haven't answered in the sessions, make some suggestions, and maybe have a little bit of discussion about where to go from here as a community. So maybe we can just start with some real quick introductions so we know who all is on the Zoom with us here today. I'll just go around my screen, starting with Anne.
Anne Giroux here today, mostly representing the County Land Bank Authority as well as the County Brownfield Authority.
Thank you. Fred?
Yes, good morning still. Fred Stonehouse, City Commissioner Marquette, not representing the city in any way, but here as a commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Jeff Corpy, had a long time career in housing here at Northern Michigan University, and then currently work with public-private partnerships with the institution and play a little bit of role in the consulting role, mainly in California.
Okay, thank you. Jerome?
Hi, yeah, my name is Jerome Levesque. I'm a private landowner in Marquette, and I work for the federal government remotely in Marquette.
Okay, thank you. Jen?
Jen Hill, there's a lot of Jens in Marquette. Jen Hill, yeah, also city commissioner, not representing the commission, not representing the city, and I guess another hat I wear, I'll mention, is I work for a group called 5 Lakes Energy that is looking at beneficial electrification. And so the issue of how we power the homes that we're building is also important to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Antonio?
I'm a little late. Antonio Don, community resident, Connect Marquette, volunteer, sit on the board, and have sat on the ad hoc housing committee. I have a lot of passion behind the subject, so I wanted to just introduce myself for those that don't know me. Glad to be here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Antonio. Ashley?
Hi, everybody. Ashley Shapansky, Marketing Director for the LSCP.
Okay. Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan from the LSCP. Thanks everyone for being here.
And I would just like to thank Ashley and Megan for doing all the behind the scenes coordination on all of this. It's gone really smoothly technology wise, and that's all thanks to them. So really appreciate your help in putting this together, guys. The other Ashley on the screen. I think you're on mute, Ashley.
Oops, sorry. Ashley Marjamaki. I work for Great Lakes Recovery and Offender Success, and we cover all 15 counties in the UP.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer? The other Jennifer? Okay.
Hi, I am a realtor. I am a City of Marquette landowner, and I don't represent anyone, just seeing what I can learn and how I can help.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Ryan?
Hi, Ryan Susi, Senior Planner with the Central UP Planning and Development Region.
Thank you. Joy?
Hi, my name is Joy Cardillo. I'm a local architect designer and in Marquette, and I'm also chair of the Marquette Planning Commission. That I'm not here representing Marquette. I'm just here to listen and learn.
Okay, thank you. Sally?
Hi, I'm Sally Davis. I'm a Marquette City Commissioner and just here to learn. Thank you.
Thanks. Mike? Is Mike still with us? Okay, we'll come back. Katie? Maybe we'll come back to Katie too. Joanna?
Yes, thanks. I'm Johanna Bolgater. I'm a City of Munising Commissioner. I'm not representing the commission today, but yeah, just very interested in all the unique solutions that maybe we can apply here in my community. Thanks.
Thank you. Jana? Okay. Jana's got some audio issues. She is the repair program manager at Marquette County Habitat for Humanity. Thank you for joining us, Jana. Chris?
Yes, my name is Chris Hirschenberger. I'm a property holder up in Marquette, and I'm actually getting ready to retire here pretty soon, and left Michigan for a while and just getting reacquainted. That's all.
Okay, thank you. If I missed anybody, oh, Mary, sorry, my screen has moved around a bit.
That's okay, I jumped on late. Mary Myers, the Director of Business Development at the LSCP.
Okay. And again, if I missed anybody, please feel free to speak up. Thanks again for being a part of the discussion today. And like I said, I don't have a real formal plan for the discussion, just kind of want to hear from you all and see what your reactions were to the information that we shared over the last day or so. Does anybody have any immediate comments or just general observations?
It is clearly an overwhelming challenge. Statement of the obvious.
But an important one.
And an important one. It would be nice to know how big the elephant is. In other words, how many facilities, rooms, structures, what capacity should we have? What spells success? How do you know when you've achieved that?
That's a great point, Fred. And I know that the housing needs assessment is a start in that direction, just giving us the number of total units. Antonio, I don't know if you have anything to add about the information that the ad hoc can be put together. But I think the kind of data that Luke Forrest showed early in his presentation, translating the number of units that we need into dollars is always a really helpful benchmark to understand what we need to get to. Antonio, I don't know if you...
Yeah, there was nothing in the document that really had any validity to it because we hadn't done a housing study. So we're all just kind of trying to get our arms around this very mythical elephant. But certainly the numbers that were presented earlier, 300,000 needed in the state of Michigan for about $45 billion, puts it in a perspective that we can't even conceive of at a local level. You know, what's our share of that? And how do you determine share? Unless you're looking at a micro economic area. You can't look at an individual unit of government because that's simply makes no sense. We commute, we go back and forth, we change. So the only way that works is if you tie in a transportation system. We don't have one in Marquette. So you can't have anything to tie everybody together no matter where you're living and how you're getting to work and where you're shopping and all those things that you would typically find in a metropolitan community. I'll be quiet. Food for thought.
Antonio, did you have anything you'd like to share on the ad hoc committee information?
Yeah, so we'll probably get to that a little bit later as well for some of the recommendations, but just some general overall thoughts that I really enjoyed about the presentations. The case study in particular, I think the land bank is a really good option for certain elements here. Marty's presentation, I thought was just phenomenal, just with getting attention from employers, both small, mid-size, large. I think it's becoming very, very difficult to build in this county. And the permit stat, I mean, I was shocked to hear that there's 60% less permit applications. Because one of the things that when we talked about our developer on the committee that sat with us, you know, he was complaining that there were so many so many challenges with actually getting permits rolled out. And that was one of the biggest takeaways is how do we fix that process from the developer standpoint to go to the city and say, hey, I need a utility line added. right? Why do we have to go through 3 levels of approval for this when we can make it all consolidated? So it started to I started to think about some of the things that we talked about in the report. And I do think, and I agree with Fred, there's a lot of challenges here that it's not just coming from one angle. So kudos to Marty for highlighting a lot of that too.
Mhm. Mhm. It's a great point. And Fred, your comment about the transportation system, I think one of the trends in the housing discussion is to consider housing and transportation costs as a unit. So creating a new benchmark for affordability that factors in transportation costs. And in the past, it's always been you're living in a quote affordable house if it's less than 30% of your household's income. And now the conversation is it's an affordable location and housing situation if it's 45% or less of your income, including both housing and transportation costs in that equation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we have to figure out a way to drive those two together and try and solve them simultaneously. And that opens up 2 different dragons. So we're not just fighting a single issue of a home, you're fighting a single additional issue. How do you transport people from that home location? Because plainly the city of Marquette is largely built out. So there's not a lot of opportunity to build within the city. You can do some boutique building, some of those opportunities, but when you begin to look at thousands of requirements potentially for housing, that's not the answer. So the bus line has to bus in, the transportation net, whatever it happens to be, has to tie into that.
And I think
can I jump in, Sarah?
Absolutely.
Push back a little. I don't think Marquette is built out. I think there's a lot of opportunity for infill housing, and we just haven't even asked that question yet. And I am excited for the opportunity that this summit is going to offer to us to look at those opportunities and all the creative ways that we might be able to help address that. Notably, they do have higher costs. That's understood, but we do have the opportunity to look at opportunities right downtown where there are there's underdevelopment. There's flat, empty lots that could be built on top of. That could be opportunities for that. So we're and in particular, I learned that from all of this, just that we have the same population, but need twice as many households. We need twice as many housing units. That's what I'm really walking away from this, as the thing that I'm going to help people understand. Is, people have come to me and said, there's these new houses, there's this new, these luxury condos and things, but we still don't have enough housing. And I think that's really an important question. I do agree with Fred that it's a regional question as well, but downtown Marquette has absolutely the opportunity to have more housing, as particularly because office space needs have completely changed since COVID. And so we don't need office necessarily, but maybe, the co-located office spaces that we already developed and we're developing in the downtown are also opportunities that mean that people could walk to work from a condo or a rental. And that kind of opportunity for our young professionals is going to be really important.
Well,
I also think there's a lot of conversations that we can have with transit. That's not a lost cause. And the young people in particular are also going to be bringing that to the fore, and older people who are not necessarily going to be wanting to drive, not wanting to drive at dark. There's a lot of opportunities there as well.
Well, we have to be leery. Again, we have great opportunity for boutique build outs. And that's, I think, what we're both talking about, using different language. But when we look at the sum mass of housing we should be providing for the city, theoretically, we certainly don't have those big swatches of open space that would allow us to do developments that might be well-tuned and publicly financed. If we're working with private property, that's, as we all know, a different set of standards that we're applying and trying to make function. So we have room, we have space, we don't have all the space. That was the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
But opportunity, yeah, I was thinking that maybe it would be interesting to see a plan that focused on boutique development rather than big development. What spots are available, what could be done with empty lots, et cetera, that would address it more on a neighborhood community problem than necessarily the macro one that we just went through. I'll be quiet again, I'm sorry.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think oftentimes one of the things that scares people in housing conversation is that there's an assumption that it is going to be just one big development that's going to kind of subsume the community, or be a big tower outside of town, or a big subdivision that's going to change the character of the community. But it doesn't have to be like that. And there's lots of different ways to integrate housing throughout the community. And I think the example that Marilyn mentioned towards the end, where they're creating a scattered site development in the city of Flint, is a perfect example of you're still working in a comprehensive way to make sure that needs are addressed, but you're doing it throughout the community, not all in one place. And it also gets to, building that housing throughout the community, within the community, gets to some of the transportation issues that you mentioned, and some of the transportation costs that can make living situations unaffordable. So all great points. And I think there has been a lot of really great conversation, and some of it coming out of the ad hoc committee report, that while we're talking at the moment about integrating housing throughout the city of Marquette, this is a regional issue, and how can we make sure that our other communities are more connected and have development opportunities as well. So before I move in that direction, are there any comments from others about general reactions to the discussion, or ideas that they came up with, or things you think we might need to look at more closely?
I have a couple like anecdotal things I'd like to add. I think as far as like the point on transportation, it's well beyond Marquette as far as like affordable housing and the transportation linked together. Anyone that's gone up to the crossroads at 9 a.m. knows that there's a huge traffic influx from Nagani and Ishpeming and Gwen coming into Marquette to find jobs. And there's affordable housing out there, but that transport link is not in the equation. And then on boutiques, like I purchased a illegal triplex about 5 years ago. It's a legal duplex now, and I've been working on it on my own. And I think the biggest issue I have is like a personal developer of a piece of property in Marquette, is that I can't find contractors at all to do work, because my job is, I'm paying out, sub $10,000 per project kind of deal. And a lot of the stuff on these older houses, these contractors don't want to work on. Talking about lap and plaster, or these old trusses on my roof and stuff like that.
I would agree, finding a contractor is so difficult. I've been trying to find someone for my clients, just to even do painting, and everybody's a year to 2 years booked out. And then the cost is exorbitant. It doesn't, meet with the needs. I agree with the development opportunities that we have, but again, the cost to develop the properties is so large in contrast to the pricing. I think getting the community involved or knowledgeable and changing the messaging that yes, we are changing. Growth, there's change with growth. It's going to happen, but we need to get people more looking at the positive and how that affects our business, our schooling, all of it. It's not just housing.
Okay. Great point. I think we heard a few times through the webinars that having that community support and that community dialogue is going to be really important. Just an anecdote on my end to your comment about contractors, even housing impacts them as well. And just as an example, I know a couple that wanted to move to Marquette from Wisconsin. He is a contractor, and they gave up because they couldn't find any housing. They were even looking for housing that they could fix up. And so our housing market is even keeping out the, the contractors that we need to actually build the housing. So it's a pretty frustrating, endless cycle. But that's why we're here today, to try to figure out how we can take our first steps. One of the questions I have for this group is kind of going back to Jerome's comment about the influx of traffic from Ishpeming and Negaunee, and how we're sort of spreading out across the county, and that we really need to look at this as a regional issue. In response to that reality, and to some of the recommendations that were in the ad hoc committee report, we kind of banded together this intergovernmental housing task force group that we talked about a little bit yesterday, and heard from city managers and township planner from Marquette Township. One of the conversations that group has had is about how we cast a wider net and bring more people into the conversation. I guess I'm curious about your thoughts on who else needs to be at the table, and some of the priorities or activities you think that group should be involved in, just off the top of your head, understanding that's a conversation that could go on for a long time.
I would like to know, I guess, if anybody, I'm a lifelong resident of Forsyth Township, Gwynn. So when they're talking about the crossroads and all of us coming into work in the morning and things like that, I can understand, pushback on people and things, but what about the utilization of KI Sawyer, which, would be, as we talk about busing, it could be a more centralized location and things like that. Would that kind of property qualify for anything in blight? I mean, I know a lot of our local residents down here, there's a stigmata of living on KI Sawyer when it first initially opened up, the cheap rentals, the types of folks that were going in there, the drug use out there, stuff like that. Would it benefit maybe to have a project like Madeline was talking about, and quote unquote cleaning up an area and utilizing all that empty space out there? Or is that still like government owned and too hard to fight with?
I think there's some opportunities there, obviously some challenges. One of the things that I'm hopeful about in all of these conversations about the federal dollars we're trying to figure out how to spend right now is that there is more of a focus than there has been on addressing issues like blight and community revitalization. So maybe down the road, there's an opportunity to redevelop some of that and change improve the community so that we do have more development options in the county. So I think that's a great point. But I certainly think that that needs to be a part of the conversation at the regional level. So would really love to see more township participation in the housing task force. And I should say our other representative from the housing task force here is Anne. So if she wants to chime in on any of that, please feel free.
Yeah, I do wish we had a little bit more township participation in that group. So, we could probably do some targeted reach out to try to make that happen. I do remember Transit being at the first session, but we haven't seen them since. I do think they should be part of that conversation. I too am a West Ender, so I'm part of the masses coming in and out of Marquette at the beginning and end of the day. And I have long thought that, if we had a transit system that could get me to Marquette in a half hour without jumping off of a bus and getting onto another one, I'd be the first one to sign up. So I definitely think they need to be part of that conversation. And there is a lot of vacant space at Sawyer, and some of it is county owned, some of it isn't. There are opportunities there. I think the struggle that we have, and we have this struggle in Ishpeming as well, which I talked about with our Mishta Mod program, really hard to sell $180,000 home in some of these neighborhoods that people just view as undesirable. And KI Sawyer's got a lot of home ownership. It isn't what it was 10 years ago. The land bank has actually sold a lot of property to homeowners out at Sawyer. So but it's tough to get over that hurdle, and we struggle with that in Ishpeming as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if it was presented to the community as a revitalization and, you know, a positive usage of things versus just leaving it with the idea of what was, like you said, the 10-year ago theory on it. Because there really is, there's a lack of education. And I guess myself, even I'm coming from a different standpoint. I work with folks who are re-entering the community from prison. So, you know, I definitely have a different, unique thought on things. But what I'm really watching these folks is we get them in, we house them in housing that we pay for. And then when we get them to a place of positive employment where they're in this place of they're making too much money to qualify for anything like MSHA and stuff like that, but they're ready to move forward in life, you know, would that be a great place to be able to do something like that and to rebrand and to educate the community of it's not all bad, this is a great thing, and it's not just giving free things to folks or low income, stuff like that.
A great point. That's often a challenge we find is when people are finally able to move up the income ladder and lose the supports they had in this housing market. That makes a really big impact on their budgets. So that's one of the topics that we've talked about a lot at the state level is how to make sure we don't have as many people falling through the cracks on that issue.
I also think another maybe underutilized tool is the new Marquette County plan that they just put a lot of time and effort into developing that could also be a way to help facilitate some of these conversations. And they broke the county up into those regions, which I thought were really pretty smart. Blueberry Hills, you know, and you know, some of the other names for them even to sort of, I felt I mean, Marquette County is, you know, enormous. It's the second or third largest county east of the Mississippi or whatever it is. So we're, you know, we're almost having state level issues, you know, if you, and what we're trying to solve here. So we can give ourselves, that challenge is really big, but we can, I think there's lots of different ideas, and that even their website allows you to go in by region or to go in by issue and look at how some of the recommendations that they've made. So in terms of answering your question about what else could we do, I wonder, we have that, you know, the City of Marquette's ad hoc committee report, which was fairly narrow in the city, but there's maybe opportunities of using the county plan as a way to kickstart some of these conversations. And they did get a fair amount of community engagement. And I don't know if I could, so that's one idea. And then piggybacking on the idea of community engagement, we have, you know, Marty did give a great presentation. That is the second time I've heard him say it. And it just continues to come home about that loss of funding that we have because we don't have elementary age K-12 children. The question of, oh shoot, I lost where I was going. And the, what was I going to say? The bringing together people across the county and that if there was a way, you know, there's this sort of always, there's this hierarchy of the communities. And I think if there's a way we can just have that conversation without like somehow putting that off the table, right? Like, you know, it doesn't, that's just somehow we can come up with a way of talking about our housing issues and our, you know, people where people want to live without always having this hierarchy in our head. I mean, that's a big dream, but it's so counterproductive. It just, and we somehow have to get through that conversation to then have the real conversation about transportation and housing, and somehow addressing that as we then go through to getting to the next point of, well, what does the community look like in 20 years? And how it could be so much better integrated, so much more fun, so much more activities happening at all the different parts of the county. I look forward to the opportunity to help make that happen.
If I could just jump in here, Jen has talked to this aspect previously, at least at commission meetings, and really it makes an awful lot of sense, especially when you tie it to where are we in 20 years based on climate change. In other words, we know that we have people now coming up here because of climate change, better environment than other places, and they need to be fed into the system. So what does the system do to support that? Which an incident part of is obviously transportation, but obviously also housing. How are we getting ahead of the game a little bit on what's going to be happening here, or will we be caught short again as we currently are with housing? I would suggest also just some thought given, why do we have no township people here? I don't think we have anybody representing the townships. I don't think, with the exception of Ann, we have anybody representing the county. And as Jen pointed out very well, the importance of the county plan and the master plan, which in a way parrots many of the same issues that we're discussing here. But where are they? Because really the county ought to be driving this train, not all of us. It belongs to the county. And that responsibility has apparently been abrogated.
And I will take ownership of representing the county.
And you're doing a great job, but the planning staff ought to be here smiling and taking notes.
Yeah, we actually had 2 planners participate in the summit. I don't know that they're on this roundtable, but they did participate. And I would just mention, as far as the master plan, we are very proud of that. Thank you for the shout out. Our planning department did a fabulous job with it. And we did, in fact, with the county's ARPA work session earlier this week, where the county board considered what to do with its ARPA allocation. We had a column on that sheet about the master plan strategies that were achieved with each of our recommendations. So it is being used, and it is important.
And I would add that one of the reasons that we had a lot of city participation in the housing task force and county participation is the leaders there have heard from their constituents about this issue. And I think it's can't be overstated that if the community wants local leadership to take action on this issue, leadership really needs to hear that. And so having these regular community discussions, I think, is an important part of getting them on board. But I do think there's an opportunity to better connect with townships. I do plan to attend or hope to attend a Michigan Township Association meeting to introduce this topic and make a more personal invitation to participate in the task force and make sure that we're having the conversation with the whole county. The other thing I wanted to mention is that QPAD is working on the Marquette County Economic Resiliency Plan, and housing has been a big point of discussion in that process. Ryan, I don't know if you have any updates on where we are with the resiliency plan, but I think there's been discussion, Fred, and Jen, about some of your comments regarding bigger, longer term vision and making sure that we integrate different considerations into how we develop and what we're planning for down the road.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. We're going to be publishing that document later this week. And also we have a training session that's coming up on the 16th next week for other counties that are due to get a economic recovery strategy. So more to come on that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to throw out before we maybe switch away from the task force talk that NMU I know would be happy to be represented on that. You know, we operate 3,000 on-campus beds. We have 6,000 students out in the community. A lot that have chosen to move outside of Marquette in the last couple of years because of the lack of housing. So anything we can do to help, I'd be happy to represent Northern on that. And I know we're looking to add more beds here soon. So whatever we can.
Thank you, Jeff. That would be great. We'd love to have NMU be a part of that.
I wonder too, like trying to educate and let the community be made aware of what's going on, how we're working on this, how it affects all aspects of the community, like I mentioned before. And just getting a little snippet on the news doesn't really give us time to explain. And so if they're looking on Facebook and then there's all these negative messages, would maybe doing like a program on PBS, like they have Ask the Lawyers, where we have a program that we can educate and explain what's happening, get more people involved, more people aware. Maybe that's an avenue to look at. Just, a program to get word out.
Mm-hmm. It's a great idea.
And if I could just kind of piggyback on that, I think as a planning commissioner, we are working towards, at the direction of sort of the city, doing all of these things. And I really do think it is about like thinking about these different scales, right? Doing larger projects that really target a certain level of income, and then also enabling sort of more individual people to do, changing the rules, changing the zoning, changing the ordinances to make it easier for private local people to do things on their level. But if we're not really getting the information out there about these changes that are being made and the reasons why they're being made, and sort of really framing the discussion, then people aren't going to take advantage of it. And I mean, in the work that I do as an architect and designer, I really, I see a lot of people who sort of have the desire but aren't experts in this, and they don't know. And so, a lot of time I'm educating them, which is fine, and I'm happy to do it. But I think that if we really are able to effectively communicate all of these things that we're doing, and not just in not just at the city level, but across the region, it's going to go a long way towards making this successful.
Thank you, Joy. I think those are all great points, and I personally would love to see something like that happen. There are a couple of models in Michigan of communities that have been really proactive and deliberate about those communications and about getting information out on a regular basis. And I think that there's a growing recognition that that's something that we need resources and capacity for. But understanding that there have been a couple organizations that have been developed specifically to do that. In the meantime, I think there's opportunities for us to just be really proactive with our own initiatives and communications. Craig from Ishpeming mentioned yesterday that the LSCP will be working with the city of Ishpeming on communications, and it won't be housing specific, but that's the kind of thing that if we have really a really deliberate plan to talk with the community on a regular basis about what's happening, it's another avenue for getting that information out there. So I think that that's absolutely critical. I was really glad that a couple of representatives from the media joined us for the Housing Solutions Summit yesterday and today. And so that's half the battle, having the media on board and understanding some of these solutions. So.
Yes, and I think not just focusing on the housing point. Yes, housing is what we're discussing today in this whole summit, but, and some people might say, I have a house, this doesn't affect me. Well, it does, because this is affecting our workforce, our businesses, the schooling, healthcare. There is a trickle down effect. So we all should be concerned and take an interest in how can we help? How can we be a part of the solution and come up with ideas and ways that will benefit all of us as a community? And so focusing not just maybe specifically on the one housing, yes, that's what we're talking about, but bring in all the other aspects that affect this too, and the communities at large.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a big topic and it touches on so many things. So it's, I think it makes a lot of sense to try to bring it back to other elements within the community and how it impacts those. Any other?
Yeah, so the thing that I forgot, that I was trying to come to that I forgot, is that lack of capacity. And I've worked in bigger cities, and now I've been here for 7 years, and it is noticeable how many fewer resources there are in, we have 67,000 people in the county, and that and our governments are stretched so thin, so very thin. And I appreciate that LSCP is now able to step up and pick up some of the work that honestly used to be handled by governments. And so I, in the communication in particular, and so when we are wondering where people are, is, well, they're off doing all the other things that they have to do every day. And that's on top. And then we have COVID on top of that. So my experience with being able to do that bigger level planning is that it does take giving people like 2 months notice to plan that, and really making sure that they're going to attend. Like, even I think we had, and I think that's what we had for this, right? You guys gave us 2 months notice, I think. And being able to really put that on my calendar, make sure I got it there. There's value in saying, well, the people who showed up are the people who can help make it happen. But then there's real value in being intentional and saying, you know what, we really need this person here, so we're going to actually make sure they get here. And I've seen efforts happen here where, well, this is who showed up, and so we'll figure out what we can. But to be a little more intentional about pulling everybody in and making sure they're at the table, because then we can move faster once they're there. And so to answer your question, Sarah, I think, right, some other local elected officials, and so I did see, I had a long conversation with somebody on Facebook yesterday. She would have loved to have been here. She has a day job. We're sitting here talking at 12 o'clock, and so moving it into the evenings, moving it into the weekends, and providing childcare so that the people could attend. And how we actually, if we want to get more participation, we're going to have childcare, and we're probably going to meet outside of 9 to 5.
I really prefer in-person discussions, as I think probably most of us do. But one of the advantages of this format is that we can record it and make it available to everyone after the fact. So that's one of the things that we plan to do, is make all of the webinars available to participants on our website. So that's one silver lining in the Zoom cloud. But yes, I understand it's hard for everyone to fit all of this into their schedule. And I know even making it available after the fact is sometimes still difficult for people to fit in. But we do want to have, I think your point about direct outreach to specific individuals is great and really necessary. And that's something that we're hopeful that we can do more of. We've talked about this a little bit, and I'm very new to the community, and so I don't know everybody, and I don't know everybody at the townships. And so when they got the invitation for me, I think it was probably easy to ignore if you haven't been hearing about housing. And so I think again, going back to what we talked about earlier, when township leaders, or city leaders for that matter, hear from their constituents that they really want their leadership to be involved in housing, that's when we start to see their participation pick up. But I do, like I said, plan to attend the Township Association and do some more individual outreach to the townships that we know we need to have at the table. There's a question on whether we have a housing needs assessment for the city of Marquette, and rather than type my answer, I guess I'll just respond. QPAD has a housing needs assessment for the county. I don't know if there's, Ryan, if there's data specific to the city of Marquette, and the city's ad hoc committee had some data, but I don't know that it was a complete housing needs assessment. So there is information out there on what our needs are, but I know there's always interest in more.
It is not accurate. It is a hands around, but it certainly is not discrete as it needs to be for adequate planning.
Okay.
I would add that it used zip code level data and included Marquette City and Township all together.
Right. I mean, it's good effort. It's what there is.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on next steps?
I don't have any thoughts on next steps, but I love this web format of the meeting myself. It makes it a lot easier for me to attend, or I can go back and watch it later. So I appreciate that. I attended the previous one that you guys had. I actually shared the information. There was a link. I shared it with one of our representatives when talking about one of the bills that was being discussed. And I wish we'd had somebody from a representative here in the meeting or one of their staff members so that they know firsthand what's going on, what we're discussing, what the community in this region is trying to do. But I just wanted to tell you, I appreciate the web meeting format myself.
Okay. Thank you. That's good to hear.
I just want to interject an idea with respect to density of the cities, and this could just be a Marquette problem and not a Negaunee, Nisqually, and Gwin problem, and transportation, and that is the winter parking ban. So that cuts down on a lot of like space to park in the city, and it amps up the requirements for parking on properties themselves. And I've lived in Quebec for a couple of years, and the way that they handle their snow in their very snowy region as well is that they allow parking on one side of the street overnight, where for like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then parking on the other side of the night for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so that snow removal can occur on majority of the street, but still allow parking on one side of the street. And you know, I've lived in Marquette my whole life, and it's always been the winter parking ban. And I really appreciate that they're so good at doing their job. But it just might be like an idea out there to like maybe improve the parking situation in town.
Okay. Great comment. So often parking plays a bigger role in housing than I think anyone would like to admit. But a lot of times these discussions start and stop with parking requirements. So thank you for sharing that. Any final comments? Next steps? I appreciate your comment, Jennifer, that you share this information with others. I think that's an important start, is just making sure that the people that we know have the information and resources about what's going on. So we really appreciate you being here today and helping to spread the word. If you have any thoughts or want to participate at a broader level after today's event, feel free to reach out to me. We would love to have you be a part of conversations as they continue, and really appreciate your participation over the last couple of days. I think it's been really great to see your participation, hear all of your great comments and questions, and I think that definitely gives us some sense of where we need to go next.